Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the honor of hosting Secretary Mark Esper at Fort Drum just a few weeks ago, and in our discussions with family members but also service members, he focused on the need to address things that were eating up our readiness, and one of the examples was online training. What are some of those other examples of exercises, things that we're asking our men and women in uniform to do that are eating up the readiness? And the reason I'm asking this, because our number one focus is on readiness recovery, how can we address that excess, whether it's training, exercises? I'd love your perspective.
Ma'am, he's beating me up over that every day, just on email last night, because he's at 1st Cav Division right now, and he said the commanders are telling them because of the European rotational requirements, behavioral health stuff, other medical issues, about 200 to 300 of our soldiers there probably aren't going to go because of theater requirements. So quickly, depends on what authoritative documents you're talking about, but 350-1 is the Army self-inflicted training requirements. We have just reduced those now down to individual marksmanship, PT, battle drill, collective tasks, and took all the other mandatory training, and the Secretary is allowing commanders to accept risk to mission, risk to force. It doesn't mean things like SHARP, EO, suicide prevention aren't important, but by us telling them to do that every year for an hour in the classroom, it's not working. So he's not a fan of that. He's not a fan of online training requirements like trips. So every time people want to go on leave or pass, they got to spend a whole day filling out this questionnaire, which takes forever. So he's already, he shut that off last week. But then the bigger issue becomes what are other theater required issues, like the CENTCOM, the individual requirements are 3 pages long if you're going to deploy to the CENTCOM theater. So we are working with OSD, PNR, Mr. Wilkie's team, the Joint Staff, and trying to find out what would make, minus environmental geographic issues like diseases and things, what would make Africa different than CENTCOM, different than Europe for rollover drills and those kinds of things. But how do we get that litany of things down and say, hey, here's your basic requirements to get on an airplane and go? And that, so it's a holistic look at everything, but when I say everything, it's about a 73-page document with 900-something tasks that we have uncovered that he's made us do, which is, we'll go as fast as we can to give commanders more flexibility.
Thank you for noting the importance of programs like SHARP. By addressing some of the mandatory online training, what I thought was particularly helpful hearing from Secretary Esper and our men and women in uniform was that we need to have principles that we practice every single day, not just broken down into an hour of taking an online training course. My second question is about some of our future challenges when you look at 21st century warfare. With the creation of Army Futures Command and the need to be ready for wars of tomorrow, how do you envision AI, artificial intelligence, being incorporated into the Army modernization priorities that you have already established?
It fits right in with everything we were talking about earlier about all the it's part of our multi-domain task force approach from an intel, cyber, electronic warfare, space perspective. But just last week, Secretary McCarthy directed the G2, ASALT, and myself to go out to Microsoft and go, we're going to partner with industry to figure out how to go faster with AI and not slower as we incorporate what artificial intelligence will give our commanders sooner than later. So we're doing, I think we're doing Amazon next week, and we're doing Microsoft like a week or two later. But trying to learn from industry, who is so much further ahead of us on that, and figure out how to integrate it into our training policies, et cetera.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. I think that's very important, particularly as we look at near-peer adversaries in terms of their investment when it comes to AI, and they've really integrated it into their militaries, but also how they're approaching readiness in the 21st century and making sure that we have the capabilities we need. Thank you. With that, I yield back.